The mysterious pact. Juma was a humble farmer who lived in a small, remote village tucked away in the hills of Africa. His life was simple, but it was not easy. He worked tirelessly from dawn till dusk, tilling the rocky soil and tending to his few crops, yet he barely had enough to eat. Juma had no family to support him. His parents had passed away when he was a child, and he had grown up learning to fend for himself. Despite his struggles, he was known in the village as a kind and honest man, someone who would never hesitate to help others, even if it meant going without himself. One fateful evening, as Juma made his way back home from his farm, a strange sound caught his attention. It was a faint, hissing noise mingled with crackling flames. As he followed the sound, he came upon a small fire in the undergrowth. To his astonishment, a large snake was trapped in the flames, writhing in agony as it struggled to escape. Juma hesitated. Snakes were often feared in the village, seen as omens of danger or misfortune. But as he watched the creature's desperate struggle, he couldn't turn away. Even a snake deserves a chance to live, he muttered to himself. Taking a deep breath, he grabbed a long stick and carefully pushed aside the burning branches, creating a path for the snake to slither free. The snake paused for a moment, its glowing eyes meeting Juma's. Then, to his amazement, the creature began to shimmer and change. Before his eyes, the snake transformed into a tall, ethereal figure with golden skin that glowed faintly in the moonlight. Her eyes sparkled like stars, and her voice was both melodic and commanding as she spoke. "You have shown kindness to one that many would fear or harm," the figure said. "I am Naya, a guardian of wealth and fortune. For your act of selflessness, I offer you a gift, but it comes with a price." Juma was stunned, his mind struggling to comprehend what he was witnessing. "A gift? What kind of gift?" he asked cautiously. "I can grant you untold wealth and success," Naya replied, her voice soft yet unwavering. "Your barren fields will flourish, your home will become grand, and you will never want for anything again. But in return, you must agree to a pact." Juma's heart raced. The idea of escaping his life of poverty was tempting, but the word pact made him uneasy. "What kind of pact?" he asked. "There are 3 rules you must follow," Naya said, her gaze piercing. "First, you must never reveal the source of your wealth to anyone. Second, you must never harm me or attempt to sever our bond. Third, and most important, you must never betray my trust by loving another woman. If you break any of these rules, the wealth I grant you will vanish, and the consequences will be severe." Juma's mind swirled with questions. "Why me? And why these rules?" he asked. "You saved me when you had no reason to," Naya replied. "That act of compassion has earned you this chance. As for the rules, they are the terms of my gift. Wealth often breeds greed and betrayal, and I will not be taken for a fool. These rules are non-negotiable." Juma hesitated, torn between his desire for a better life and his unease about the conditions. But the image of his withered crops and his empty home loomed large in his mind. Finally, he nodded. "I agree." Naya smiled, a look of satisfaction crossing her face. She reached out and touched Juma's forehead with her finger. A warm, golden light spread through him, filling him with a sense of power and vitality. "It is done," she said. "Return to your home, and you will see the fruit of your decision. But remember the rules, Juma. Break them, and you will face the consequences." With that, Naya vanished, leaving Juma alone under the starry sky. He stood there for a moment, his heart pounding, before turning and hurrying back to his hut. When he arrived, he could hardly believe his eyes. His modest home had transformed into a large, sturdy house with beautiful carvings adorning its walls. His once barren fields were lush with crops, their green leaves glistening in the moonlight. Inside, he found sacks of gold coins and fine clothes neatly arranged. Juma fell to his knees, overwhelmed by the sight. But even as he marveled at his newfound fortune, a small voice in the back of his mind whispered a warning: remember the rules. And so, Juma's life changed forever, but he had no idea that the pact he had made would bring not just wealth, but also trials beyond his imagination, from rags to riches. Juma awoke at dawn to the chirping of birds outside his window. The first thing he noticed was the soft feel of the mattress beneath him, so unlike the thin mat he had grown used to sleeping on. As his eyes adjusted to the morning light, he was struck by the sight of a room that wasn't his. The walls were smooth and adorned with intricate carvings of animals and nature. Fine fabrics draped the windows, allowing golden sunlight to pour in. For a moment, Juma thought he was dreaming. He leaped from the bed and rushed outside, only to stop in his tracks. His barren farm, which had struggled to yield even the most meager crops, was now unrecognizable. Rows upon rows of lush, green plants stretched as far as his eyes could see. Corn, yams, cassava, and bananas grew in abundance, their leaves glistening with morning dew. The air smelled of fresh earth and ripe fruit, a scent so vivid it made Juma's head spin. "It's real," he whispered to himself, his voice trembling with awe. "It's all real." As he explored further, Juma discovered that his modest hut had been replaced by a grand home. It was made of sturdy wood and stone, with a thatched roof that gleamed like gold in the sunlight. Inside, he found shelves stocked with food, fine clothes made from expensive fabric, and a chest filled with gold coins. Everything Naya had promised him had come true. In the days that followed, Juma's life transformed completely. His newfound wealth and success quickly became the talk of the village. People would stop by his farm, marveling at the bounty it produced. "How did this happen, Juma?" they asked, their eyes wide with curiosity. But Juma, remembering Naya's first rule, would only smile and say, "Hard work and blessings." The villagers began to treat Juma with a newfound respect, even reverence. He was no longer the struggling farmer they pitied but a wealthy man they admired. Some of the village elders came to him, offering advice on how to manage his fortune, while others introduced him to their daughters, hoping he would choose one as his wife. "You're a man of means now," said one elder, patting Juma on the back. "It's time you took a bride and started a family." Juma would nod politely, but inside, his heart was heavy. He wanted companionship, someone to share his life with, but the memory of Naya's warning echoed in his mind: "You must never betray my trust by loving another woman." Each night, as the village quieted and the moon rose high in the sky, Juma would retreat to his room. And every night, as the clock struck midnight, Naya would appear in her snake form. She would slither onto the bed, her golden eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. Juma had grown accustomed to her presence, though it unsettled him. Naya would coil herself at the foot of the bed, silent and watchful. She never spoke, never explained why she appeared each night, but her presence was a constant reminder of the pact they had made. At first, Juma tried to ignore the loneliness that crept into his heart. He busied himself with managing his farm, distributing food to those in need, and attending village gatherings. But the more time passed, the more he yearned for something deeper, a connection, a family, a love that Naya's nightly visits could never provide. One afternoon, while Juma was at the market purchasing supplies, he met a young woman named Zoe. She was kind and lively, with a laugh that seemed to brighten the air around her. She sold pottery, and her hands were rough from hard work, but her smile was soft and warm. Zoe spoke to Juma as if he were an ordinary man, not the wealthy figure the village had come to revere. "I hear your farm is the envy of the whole region," Zoe said with a teasing smile. "Maybe you trade me some of your yams for one of my pots." Juma chuckled. "I might just take you up on that." Their conversation was light, but Juma found himself drawn to Zoe's genuine nature. For the first time in months, he felt truly seen, not for his wealth, but for who he was. That evening, As Naya appeared at midnight, Juma's thoughts were filled with joy. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, torn between his longing for companionship and the weight of the pact he had made. Is this my life now? He wondered aloud, though he knew Naya would not answer. Am I to live alone forever, bound to this silence? The snake remained still, her glowing eyes fixed on him. Juma sighed and turned away, the ache in his heart growing stronger with each passing day. As the weeks went by, the villagers continued to introduce potential brides to Juma, each one more eager than the last. But no matter how charming or beautiful they were, Juma found himself unable to entertain the idea of marriage. He knew the price of breaking Naya's trust, and it terrified him. Yet, the more he tried to suppress his feelings, the more restless he became. He couldn't stop thinking about her laugh, her kindness, the way she made him feel like himself again. And so, Juma found himself at a crossroads. He had everything he had ever wanted: wealth, success, respect. But the one thing he truly craved, love, seemed forever out of reach. Little did he know, his struggle with the pact was only the beginning of the trials he would face, the forbidden love. One sunny morning, the village bustled with news of a new arrival. A young woman named Amina had come to care for her ailing grandmother, who was well loved by the community. Amina was strikingly beautiful, with bright eyes that sparkled with warmth and a voice that carried a melody of kindness. Despite her beauty, it was her gentle nature and willingness to help others that won the hearts of the villagers almost instantly. Juma first saw Amina when she was fetching water from the river. She wore a simple dress, her hair tied neatly in a scarf, and her laughter rang out as she chatted with a group of women. Juma felt an inexplicable pull toward her, a feeling he hadn't experienced in a long time. He shook his head, reminding himself of the rules of his pact, but his gaze lingered on her for just a moment longer. Later that week, as Juma walked through the market, he saw Amina again. This time, she was helping her grandmother select vegetables. He noticed how she smiled at the vendors and greeted everyone warmly, even those who were often overlooked. Without realizing it, Juma found himself walking toward her stall. "Good morning," he said, his voice steady but his heart racing. Amina looked up and smiled. "Good morning, Juma. Everyone here speaks so highly of you. It's an honor to finally meet you." Juma felt a warmth spread through him at her words. They exchanged pleasantries, and before he knew it, they were deep in conversation. Amina spoke of her life in the city, her love for her grandmother, and her dreams of becoming a nurse to help others. Juma, in turn, shared stories of his farm and his efforts to help the village thrive. From that day on, their paths seemed to cross often. Whether at the market, by the river, or during village gatherings, Juma and Amina always found themselves drawn to each other. Amina admired Juma's humility despite his wealth, and Juma cherished her genuine kindness. Their connection grew stronger with each passing day. One evening, Juma invited Amina to visit his farm. As they walked through the flourishing fields, she marveled at the beauty of the crops and the effort it must have taken to achieve such abundance. "You have a gift, Juma," she said, her eyes filled with admiration. "Not just for farming, but for caring about others. The villagers speak of how you share your harvest with those in need. That's rare." Juma felt a pang of guilt at her words, knowing that his wealth was not entirely his doing. But her presence made him feel whole in a way he hadn't felt since making the pact. For the first time in a long time, he allowed himself to dream of a life with someone by his side. That night, as the clock struck midnight, Naya appeared in her snake form. Juma lay in bed, his thoughts still lingering on Amina. The snake coiled at the foot of the bed, her golden eyes glowing in the dim light. But this time, Juma felt uneasy. He closed his eyes, hoping to sleep, but his dreams were restless. In one vivid dream, Naya appeared in her mystical form, her voice echoing like thunder. You are treading dangerous ground, Juma, she warned. Have you forgotten the third rule of our pact? Betray my trust, and you will lose everything, including your life. Juma woke with a start, his heart pounding. Naya's warning lingered in his mind, but he quickly pushed it aside. She doesn't control me, he muttered. I can have both. I can love Amina and keep my wealth. She doesn't need to know. Despite the warning, Juma continued to see Amina, though he kept their meetings a secret. He told himself that he wasn't breaking the pact, he wasn't in love with Amina, at least, not yet. But deep down, he knew the truth. Each time he saw her smile or heard her laugh, his feelings for her grew stronger. Amina, too, began to develop feelings for Juma. She admired his humility, his kindness, and his quiet strength. One evening, as they sat under a large baobab tree, Amina turned to him and said, Juma, I've met many people in my life, but none like you. You make me believe in the goodness of the world again. Her words filled Juma with both joy and dread. He wanted so badly to confess his feelings, to tell her everything, but the weight of Naya's warning held him back. As the days turned into weeks, Juma found himself living a double life. By day, he was the respected farmer admired by the village. By night, he was a man haunted by the snake's presence and the consequences of his growing love for Amina. The lines between loyalty and longing blurred, leaving Juma torn between two worlds. I can have both, he told himself repeatedly, as if saying it enough times would make it true. But in the depths of his heart, Juma knew he was playing with fire. And fire, as he had learned the night he saved Naya, could burn the wedding that changed everything. Juma could no longer deny his feelings for Amina. Every moment they spent together deepened his love for her, and he couldn't imagine a life without her. The thought of living under Naya's rules for the rest of his life, lonely and yearning for love, became unbearable. What is wealth if I cannot share it with someone I love, he thought. Despite the warnings in his dreams and the uneasy feeling in his chest, Juma made a bold decision: he would marry Amina in secret. In the days leading up to the wedding, strange things began to happen. The once flourishing crops on Juma's farm started to wither for no apparent reason. His livestock, which had always been healthy and abundant, grew sick and weak. At night, he could hear eerie hissing sounds outside his home, louder and closer than ever before. The villagers noticed the changes and whispered among themselves. Is this a sign from the ancestors? One elder murmured. Perhaps Juma has angered the spirits. But Juma brushed aside the ominous signs, convincing himself they were mere coincidences. He focused on planning the wedding, determined to keep it hidden from the watchful eyes of Naya and the villagers. The wedding was held at dawn, under the shade of a large baobab tree on the outskirts of the village. Only Amina's grandmother and a trusted friend of Juma's attended the ceremony. The air was filled with the sweet scent of flowers, and the sun painted the horizon in shades of gold and pink. Amina looked radiant, her simple dress adorned with handmade beads. She smiled at Juma with pure love in her eyes, unaware of the storm brewing in his heart. As they exchanged vows, Juma's hands trembled, not from nervousness, but from the weight of the pact he was breaking. When the ceremony was over, Juma felt an overwhelming sense of relief. For a moment, he believed he had outsmarted Naya. She doesn't need to know, he told himself. What she doesn't know can't hurt me. That night, as Juma and Amina prepared to share their first evening as husband and wife, the room grew cold. A chill swept through the air, extinguishing the candles and plunging the room into darkness. Amina shivered, clutching Juma's arm. What's happening? She whispered, her voice trembling. Before Juma could answer, a golden glow illuminated the room. Naya appeared in her snake form, coiled at the foot of the bed. Her eyes burned with fury, and her hissing filled the air like a venomous tongue. So, this is how you repay me, Juma. Naya's voice was sharp and cutting. You have broken the third and most sacred rule of our pact. Amina gasped, stepping back in fear. What is this, Juma? Who is she? What have you done? Juma dropped to his knees, his heart pounding. Naya, please. I didn't mean to betray you. I couldn't live alone anymore. Naya's eyes narrowed. You were given everything you could ever desire, yet you chose to betray my trust. For that, you will pay a heavy price. With a wave of her tail, Naya cursed Juma. Your wealth will vanish, and your life will be forfeit unless you prove your loyalty to me within 7 days. Fail, and you will lose everything, including her. The golden glow faded, and Naya disappeared, leaving behind an icy silence. Amina stared at Juma, tears streaming down her face. Is this true? She demanded. Did you make a pact with her? Is that where your wealth came from? Juma nodded, his face etched with shame. Amina, I'm sorry. I didn't want to lie to you, but You should have told me. Amina interrupted, her voice breaking. How could you keep something like this from me? She turned and ran from the room, leaving Juma alone in the darkness. The next morning, the villagers woke to find that Juma's farm had withered entirely. The once green fields were now barren, and the livestock lay dead in their pens. News of his misfortune spread quickly, and whispers turned to accusations. He must have angered the ancestors, some said. This is why his wealth has vanished. Others were harsher. He was never a hard worker. He must have been cursed for gaining his wealth dishonestly. The villagers, who had once admired and respected Juma, began to shun him. His friends turned their backs on him, and even those he had helped in the past avoided him. Juma was left to wander the empty fields of his farm, his heart heavy with despair. Amina, too, avoided him, staying with her grandmother and refusing to see him. Each day that passed brought Juma closer to his deadline. The weight of Naya's curse pressed down on him, and he realized that if he didn't act soon, he would lose not only his wealth but also his life, and the love of the one person who had truly mattered to him. With only 7 days to prove his loyalty, Juma knew he had no choice but to face the consequences of his actions and find a way to make things right. The journey of redemption. Juma sat on the edge of his barren field, staring at the desolation around him. The once vibrant crops were now shriveled husks, and the air that had once smelled of fertile earth was now heavy with the stench of decay. The weight of his choices bore down on him. He had lost the respect of the villagers, the trust of Amina, and the wealth he had once thought would bring him happiness. But he refused to lose his life and his last chance to make things right. Determined to save himself and win back Amina's trust, Juma decided to seek out Naya's lair. He remembered her parting words, "Prove your loyalty within 7 days." If he could find her and show her the sincerity of his remorse, perhaps she would lift the curse. The starving child. Juma packed a small satchel with what little food he had left and set out at dawn. He wandered for hours through the vast wilderness surrounding the village, unsure of where to go. As the sun climbed higher, his stomach growled, and his throat grew parched. He had just stopped to rest beneath a baobab tree when he heard a faint cry. Following the sound, he came upon a small child sitting by the side of the road. The boy's face was pale, his clothes tattered, and his eyes hollow with hunger. Beside him lay a broken clay bowl, its contents spilled onto the dusty ground. "Please, sir," the boy whispered weakly. "I haven't eaten in days." Juma hesitated, clutching his satchel. He had brought just enough food to sustain himself on his journey, and he didn't know how long it would take to find Naya. But as he looked into the boy's eyes, he remembered the days when he, too, had gone hungry. Without another thought, Juma knelt and handed the boy his entire satchel. "Take this," he said. "You need it more than I do." The boy's eyes lit up with gratitude as he devoured the food. "Thank you, sir," he said between bites. May your kindness return to you tenfold. Juma felt a glimmer of hope as he continued on his way. Perhaps the journey wasn't just about finding Naya, but about rediscovering the man he used to be. The deceitful merchant. The next day, Juma came across a bustling marketplace in a nearby town. He had no money to buy food or water, but he hoped to barter something in exchange for sustenance. He approached a merchant selling jars of fresh water and explained his predicament. The merchant stroked his beard thoughtfully. "I give you water," he said, "if you can carry this sack of grain to my store." Juma agreed, but as he lifted the sack, the merchant laughed and added, "Oh, and if you fail to deliver it within an hour, you'll owe me double the price of the water." The sack was heavier than it looked, and the store was on the far end of the marketplace. Juma's back ached, and his legs burned with effort, but he pressed on. When he finally reached the store, the merchant was waiting with a smirk. "You're late," the merchant said. "Now you owe me." Juma realized he had been tricked. "I have nothing to give," he said. The merchant sneered. "Then leave. You're wasting my time." Anger bubbled within Juma, but he took a deep breath and walked away. He realized that while the merchant's deceit had cost him, he still had his integrity. He vowed not to let bitterness cloud his journey. The wise old woman. As night fell, Juma wandered into a dense forest. The trees loomed tall and twisted, their branches casting eerie shadows. He stumbled upon a small hut, its windows glowing softly. An old woman sat outside, her face lined with wisdom and time. "You've come far, traveler," she said, her voice like the rustling of leaves. "What is it you seek?" "I seek Naya," Juma replied, his voice weary. "I must find her and prove my loyalty before it's too late." The old woman's eyes narrowed. "You carry the weight of regret," she said. "But redemption is not found in words alone, it must be earned through action." She handed Juma a small, intricately carved stone. "Solve this riddle, and it will lead you to Naya's lair. Listen carefully. I am always hungry, I must always be fed. The finger I touch will soon turn red." Juma stared at the stone, his mind racing. "Fire," he whispered, remembering the night he saved Naya from the flames. The old woman nodded. "Indeed. Follow the path where the firelight dances, and you will find her." The path to Naya. Juma followed the old woman's instructions, searching the forest for signs of firelight. Hours passed, and exhaustion gnawed at him, but he pressed on. Just as dawn began to break, he saw flickering orange and red lights in the distance. He quickened his pace, his heart pounding as he approached a hidden cave illuminated by torches. The air inside was thick with heat, and the walls glowed with a golden hue. At the center of the cave lay a pool of molten lava, and beside it stood Naya in her mystical form, her golden eyes watching him intently. "You found me," she said, her voice neutral. "But your journey is far from over, Juma. What have you learned?" Juma fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. "I've learned that I was wrong to betray your trust. I sought wealth to escape my pain, but in doing so, I forgot the value of love, honesty, and humility. I see now that true riches come from within." Naya studied him in silence, her expression unreadable. Juma braced himself for her judgment, knowing he had no choice but to face the consequences of his actions. With his renewed sense of purpose and humility, Juma awaited the trial that would determine his fate, confronting the snake. Juma stood at the entrance to Naya's lair, his heart pounding. The flickering glow of the torches illuminated the cave, revealing walls encrusted with gold and gems that sparkled like stars. Treasures beyond imagination were scattered across the ground. Golden statues, jewels the size of his fist, and ornate weapons that seemed to hum with power. But none of it mattered to Juma. His only thought was of Amina and the curse that had turned his life into a waking nightmare. As he stepped inside, the air grew thick and heavy, pressing down on him like an invisible weight. At the center of the cave, beside a bubbling pool of molten lava, Naya waited in her snake form. Her golden eyes glowed in the dim light, her coiled body resting atop a pile of glittering treasure. She looked at him with a mix of amusement and disappointment. "So, you have found me," she said, her voice echoing through the cavern. "But tell me, Juma, why should I listen to you? You have already broken my trust." Juma dropped to his knees, tears streaming down his face. "Naya, I know I have wronged you," he said, his voice trembling. "I was blinded by greed and my own desires, and I betrayed the pact we made. But I beg you, punish me, not Amina. She did nothing wrong. Let her be free from this curse, even if it means taking my life." Naya uncoiled herself, slithering closer to Juma. "You would sacrifice your life for hers?" she asked, her tone unreadable. "Why should I believe you?" Juma met her gaze, his voice steadied despite his fear. "Because I love her. And because I know now that wealth means nothing if it cost me my soul. I don't want riches or power, I just want to make things right." Naya's revelation. At Juma's words, Naya began to shimmer, her form glowing brighter and brighter until the snake disappeared entirely. In its place stood a radiant figure, tall and regal, her golden skin shining like the sun. Her eyes, still piercing and intense, now carried a depth of wisdom that made Juma feel small yet hopeful. "I am not merely a snake," Naya said, her voice now gentle yet powerful. "I am a goddess, tasked with testing humanity's greed and integrity. Many have failed my test, consumed by their own desires. But you, Juma, have shown the capacity for growth and redemption." Juma stared at her in awe. "Why test me? Why give me wealth only to take it away?" "To reveal the truth of who you are," Naya replied. "Wealth is a mirror that reflects a person's soul. It can amplify greed or magnify goodness. When I gave you riches, you lost your way. But now, faced with loss and despair, you have remembered what truly matters. That is why I offer you one final chance to prove your sincerity. The final test." Naya extended her hand, and a beam of golden light shot from her palm, illuminating a dark corner of the cave. There, trapped beneath a pile of fallen rocks, was a small creature, a wounded bird with iridescent feathers that shimmered like a rainbow. Its wing was twisted at an unnatural angle, and it struggled weakly, unable to free itself. "This bird represents the essence of kindness and selflessness," Naya said. "Your final test is to save it. But be warned. The lava surrounding it is unstable, and the ground beneath you will crumble with every step. If you fall, you will not survive." Juma's eyes widened as he looked at the bird, its tiny chest rising and falling with labored breaths. The molten lava bubbled ominously around it, the heat searing his skin even from a distance. Fear gripped him, but he didn't hesitate. "If saving this creature is the price of redemption, then so be it," Juma said. He stepped onto the unstable ground, the heat scorching his feet through his sandals. Each step sent rocks tumbling into the lava below, and the air grew hotter with every moment. Sweat poured down his face, and his heart pounded as he carefully navigated the treacherous terrain. The rescue. When Juma finally reached the bird, he knelt and gently lifted the rocks trapping it. The creature let out a weak chirp as he cradled it in his hands. Its feathers were soft but fragile, and its injured wing hung limp. Juma's heart ached for the tiny creature, and he whispered, "You're safe now." As he turned to make his way back, the ground beneath him began to crack. Lava seeped through the fissures, and the path he had taken was now gone. There was no way back. Juma looked at the bird in his hands, then at the molten pool surrounding him. He closed his eyes, whispering a silent prayer. "If this is how it ends, at least I've done something good. Just as the ground gave way beneath him, a blinding light filled the cave. Juma felt himself being lifted into the air, the heat of the lava replaced by a cool breeze. When he opened his eyes, he was back at the entrance of the cave, the bird still cradled in his hands. Naya's judgment. Naya stood before him, her radiant form glowing brighter than ever. She smiled, and her voice was filled with warmth. You have passed the final test, Juma. You risked your life to save a creature that could offer you nothing in return. That is the essence of true selflessness. She extended her hand, and the bird leapt from Juma's palms, its wing fully healed. It soared into the air, its iridescent feathers shimmering in the light. As promised, I will lift the curse, Naya said. Your wealth will return, but it will no longer define you. Instead, you will be defined by the choices you make and the love you give. Juma fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. Thank you, Naya. I will not squander this second chance. A new beginning. Juma emerged from Naya's lair feeling like a different man. The air outside was crisp and cool, and the first rays of dawn painted the sky in shades of gold and pink. He clutched his chest, feeling the weight of guilt and fear lifted for the first time in what felt like an eternity. Behind him, Naya stood in her radiant form, her expression one of both pride and solemnity. You have proven your worth, Juma, she said, her voice resonating like the hum of ancient winds. The curse is lifted, and your wealth will return. But remember this, wealth is not the source of happiness or purpose. It is merely a tool. Treasure love, integrity, and kindness above all else, for these are the true riches of life. Juma nodded, tears streaming down his face. I will, Naya. I promise to live by the lessons I've learned and to honor the second chance you've given me. Naya smiled faintly, her golden light growing brighter and brighter. Then my work here is done. With those final words, she disappeared in a flash of light, leaving Juma standing alone but renewed in spirit. A return to the village. When Juma returned to the village, the sight of him sent ripples of shock through the community. The villagers, who had shunned him, now watched in stunned silence as he walked through the dusty streets. But instead of the arrogant, wealthy man they had once resented, they saw a humble and weary figure. Juma's first stop was Amina's grandmother's house. He knocked on the door, his heart pounding with both hope and fear. When Amina appeared, her face was a mix of surprise and guarded emotion. I've come to make things right, Juma said softly. I was wrong to deceive you, and I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I want you to know that I've learned from my mistakes. If you let me, I want to show you the man I've become, not the man I was pretending to be. Amina studied him for a long moment, her eyes searching his face. Slowly, her expression softened. You've hurt me, Juma, she said. But I can see that you're truly sorry. I'm willing to give you a chance, one chance, to prove yourself. Juma felt a wave of relief wash over him. Thank you, Amina. I won't let you down. Rebuilding the farm. Over the next few weeks, Juma worked tirelessly to restore his farm, this time without relying on magical wealth. To his surprise, as he tilled the soil and planted new seeds, the land began to flourish once more. His crops grew stronger and more vibrant than ever, and the barren fields were soon transformed into a lush, green landscape. Amina stood by his side, helping him every step of the way. Together, they worked the land, shared meals, and dreamed of a future built on honesty and love. The villagers, initially skeptical of Juma's transformation, began to take notice of his generosity and humility. Juma shared his harvest with those in need, often giving away more than he kept for himself. He helped repair homes, donated supplies to the market, and ensured that no one in the village went hungry. Slowly but surely, the villagers' trust in him was restored. The moral of the story. Months later, Juma and Amina were married in a joyous celebration attended by the entire village. Their union symbolized not only their love but also Juma's redemption and the power of second chances. As the years passed, Juma and Amina built a legacy of hard work and kindness. They taught their children, and the entire village, the lessons Juma had learned through his journey. Greed and betrayal bring ruin, Juma would tell them, but kindness and humility bring lasting riches. Never forget that true wealth lies in the love you give and the lives you touch. Under their guidance, the village prospered, becoming a place of community, generosity, and hope. Juma's story became a legend, passed down through generations as a reminder of the power of integrity and the dangers of placing material wealth above all else. And so, Juma and Amina lived happily, their lives a testament to the truth that even the greatest mistakes can lead to redemption when met with courage and a willingness to change.